Hallelujah. Grace and peace to all families and friends of the Hackensack United Methodist Church. This is the 6th session on the book of Job. I would like to share with you the final chapters of debates on the book of Job. In fact, they are not a debate because there is no response from Job. But Elihu, a young companion to Job's friends, and God speak at the conclusion of the debate. I would like to discuss these points. First, from Elihu's speech, and the second, God's speech. First, let us take a look at Elihu's speech. Elihu began his speech with an excuse for his joining the debate. Chapter 32, verses 7 to 9. I thought age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the Spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty, that gives them understanding. It is not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. Elihu says he is joining the debates because he is not satisfied with the argument that three friends made. First, Elihu has the same position as the three friends in regard to accusing Job as a sinner. Second, but to Elihu, three friends' arguments were not at all satisfying because he also felt that the three friends did not win Job's responses. It is interesting that Elihu places himself at the three friends' side, but Elihu criticizes the tradition or old-aged wisdom like Job did. He said wisdom is in the fresh presence of the Spirit of God. Verse 8 says, but it is the Spirit in a person, breath of the Almighty, that gives the understanding. About Job, Elihu also presents both ideas. That is the same as the three friends, and that is different from them. The same as the friends is found in chapter 34, verses 7 to 8 and 17. Is there anyone like Job who drinks scorn like water? He keeps company with evildoers. He associates with the wicked. Can someone who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? Elihu condemns Job as one of evildoers and as one who hates God's just judgment. Different from Job's friends is found in Elihu's new perspective on suffering. Chapter 36, verses 7 to 10. He does not take his eyes off the righteous. He enthrones them with kings and exalts from forever. But if people are bound in chains, held fast by cords of affliction, he tells them what they have done, that they have sinned arrogantly. He makes them listen to correction and commands them to repent of their evil. Here, Elihu says that even the righteous people can be put in suffering when they became arrogant or strayed from the righteous. Elihu brings up the idea of the righteous people's suffering. Suffering can be used for the correction of what the righteous person's wrongdoing. For Elihu, suffering can be the means of God speaking of a message. Verse 15 says, God speaks to them in their affliction. Elihu's view on suffering of the righteous is similar to Prophet Isaiah's ideal of suffering, which is totally new to the traditional cause and effect in faith. Isaiah's notion of a suffering servant is the fundamental message to Judah who waited for the Messiah. The Messiah comes through suffering. In suffering, there could be transformational message of God for God's people. So, in sum, first, Elihu is not like the three friends in regard to the principles of cause and effect in faith, as he proposes that suffering could be a message to the righteous. Second, on the other hand, Elihu is like the three friends in regard to rebuking Job as a sinner. Let us now take a look at God's speech, which is the conclusion of the book of Job in the debates on suffering. God's speech takes up 4 chapters. It is a long speech. We expect that God speaks about any lessons on the meaning of suffering, but to me, God does not speak about it. God begins his speeches with the creation of the world and the absolute knowledge related to creation of the world. The reason that God speaks about creation is to rebuke Job, asking what Job knows that in regard to the principles that govern the ways of life in the world. Let's listen to what God asked of Job about. Chapter 38, verse 2. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? 3-4. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Verses 19-20. What is the way to the abode of life? And where does the darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? God questions Job with many examples of the detailed creaturely world. All these questions with the specific mysteries of life that we face every day in the world, in fact, rhetorically aims at 2 points of the messages about the way of thinking about suffering. That is, first, absolute knowledge beyond Job's understanding. It is mysterious to human beings. It is something like the creation of life and all the creaturely way of living their lives. How can Job answer to it? Again, God is speaking to Job about the absolute knowledge beyond human knowledge. Second, God's question about creation of the world, on the other hand, delivered the message that there is still God's governance and operational plan over the world, even though we do not understand anything about the principle of the world. It appears to us again as mystery. These 2 points of the messages in God's questions with the creation of the world remind us of the story in the beginning of the book of Job. That is the heavenly court, where the dialogue between God and Satan about Job's faith happened. How can one know about this secret dialogue between God and Satan? No human being can know. It's a mystery to us. At this point, God's question resounds in our ears. Do you know where the light and darkness reside? In verse 19. This question does not intend to acknowledge human beings' ignorance on such mysterious knowledge about life. Rather, God's speeches emphasizes that God knows all things in the world, and God governs all things with plans for the good of the world. God's good governance is well crafted in the ways that God is speaking about the creatures in God's speech. First, God talks about creation of things like earth, seas, sky, and wind, etc. And second, God talks about the animals from herbivorous to carnivorous. Here it is very interesting to hear God saying, I feed even lions. Chapter 38, verse 39 says, do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? Who satisfies the hungry lions? God does. We may think that what a pity a lamb may be to be a prey for the lions. But God operates the world and all creatures in orderly manner for the good of the creatures and the world. These ruthless questions by God come down to the long descriptions of 2 monstrous animals, that is, Behemoth and Leviathan. Some scholars think of the Behemoth as the hippos and the Leviathan as the crocodile. But many agree with the suggestion that Behemoth and Leviathan are the mythic animals, which often remind us of the chaotic evil dragons in the book of Revelation. Behemoth's strong image is described in the verses 16 to 19 of the chapter 40. I'm going to read verses 18 to 19, for example. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the work of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. The image of Leviathan is much more furious. It kills people and it's formidable against people's weapons. Verses 7 to 9 of the chapter 41. Can you feel its hide with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. Why does God talk about these 2 monstrous animals, Behemoth and Leviathan, at the end of his speeches, with the long descriptions over 2 chapters of 40 and 41? Are these 2 animals worthy of being placed at the conclusion of God's speeches? which conclude the debates between Job and Job's friends? I think, yes, it is worth mentioning these mythic monstrous animals at the conclusion, because it is very symbolic for life being mysterious, sometimes uncontrollable, and even monstrous for the ones in suffering. But God can control and tame these monstrous animals. It is the message that God governs all the furious situations in life, like facing Leviathan and Behemoth. In chapter 40, verse 24, about Behemoth, God says, "Can anyone capture it by the ears or trap it and pierce its nose?" Well, answer is that yes, God does. In chapter 41, verse 5, about Leviathan, God says, "Can you make a pet of it like a bird or put it on a leash for the young woman in your house?" No one but God can do. In conclusion, Elihu's claim that the righteous can be put in suffering and suffering delivers a message. And God's saying, God can tame the mysterious suffering for the ones beloved by God. With these messages from Elihu's and finally God's speeches, the book of Job gives us how to respond to suffering in life. Trust God and endure in the waiting for the God. Never give up pursuing for living wisdom of God. Is it an answer to Job's question, why do good people suffer? Well, at least we can have right attitude toward suffering. The book of Job advises not to give up seeking wisdom of God, looking forward to seeing God's governance over our lives, no matter how hard the suffering you experience may be. Next week, I will share one last e-message on Job with my reflection of suffering as the closing remarks on the book of Job. God bless you.